Welcome, everybody, to the very first episode of You Fascinate Me with Jamie Engle. I am your host, Jamie, and I'm excited to be here, man. This has been a passion project I've been working on for a little while. I've been podcasting since 2016 in various different forms. Some of the most fun I had podcasting was doing interviews. So I took that passion and kind of converted it into this brand new podcast. I'm going to do this one in seasons. The first season will have anywhere from 7 to 10 episodes. I can't wait to share some of the interviews that I've already done, as well as some of the amazing interviews that I have coming up. You can find me on Instagram at You Fascinate Me Pod. You can also find me on Facebook, You Fascinate Me with Jamie Engle. So follow along and see the guests coming up here. But, I don't want to spend too much time kind of introing the podcast because I got an amazing interview for the first episode here. Joining me today is going to be the award-winning documentary filmmaker, Andrew Jenks. He's also a podcaster. You've probably seen some of his work. 30 for 30. He's done posterized for the 30 for 30 movie It's Not Over, World of Jenks on MTV. Dream Killer is on Netflix, and he's got a new movie in the Tribeca Film Festival right now, and you can go to Tribeca's website and check that out, $1 Billion Babies, which is all about the Cabbage Patch Kids. I don't want to take too much time doing this intro, but I want to get right into the interview with Andrew because we talk a lot about how he got into film, some of the projects that he's worked on. We even touch a little bit about mental health and his openness and his chronic depression and how he kind of deals with that and how that factors in. But again, I don't want to give too much away. Let's just get right into the interview with Andrew Jenks.
It is now time for this week's You Fascinate Me interview. Take it away, Dad.
All right, I'd like to welcome in my guest this time, award-winning documentary filmmaker and podcaster, Andrew Jenks. Thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, Jamie. How are you, man?
I'm good. I appreciate it. This is the second time going around here and talking, and I appreciate you coming on the new one and supporting, this endeavor. So I know you're a busy guy, and especially on a Saturday here, I appreciate it.
No, Saturdays are usually there's a lot of work Monday through Friday, and Saturdays is a little bit slower. So I'm glad we could make it work.
Yeah, like I said, I appreciate it. We talked a little bit last time on my my old podcast and got to know you a little bit. I think one of the ways I kind of discovered you was, your other podcast, What Really Happened. That was one of kind of my intro into that. I follow The Rock, obviously, on all the social medias, and he had posted about this new podcast that was coming out with you. And I was hooked right away, and I just felt like I had to talk to you. And, I think the way you kind of tell a story is what fascinated me the most on this. So, what kind of attracted you into like getting into filmmaking and podcasting and things like that, and just really telling stories?
When I was a kid, I traveled around a lot because of my dad's work. And so I lived in Nepal and Belgium and about an hour north of New York City. And everywhere we went, I would always carry around this big, bulky VHS camera. And I would just film whatever was going on. It didn't matter what. And I'd always pretend to be like a CNN anchor hosting. And I think that really got me into storytelling and movie making. And when I was 19, I had just finished my freshman year of college, didn't really have a great time, and was desperate to make a movie, any kind of movie. And I thought, well, I can't make a scripted film, that would cost too much money, but maybe if I thought of a good documentary subject, I could just buy a couple cameras off of eBay at the time and try something. And so that's what I did. My first movie, I thought it'd be really interesting for a 19-year-old to move into a nursing home. And so I actually moved into a nursing home the summer after freshman year, lived there for 5 weeks with two of my friends who filmed it. And we ended up making a neat 90-minute documentary. And long story short, HBO ended up buying that movie, and that was kind of how the whole documentary thing got started.
How would you kind of describe your, storytelling or the ideas you get for some of these? Because I mean, it seems like the the discussions and the topics that you kind of do essentially are, I mean, all over the place. I mean, you talk about, you moving into the nursing home. You've done some things for, ESPN on sports. You've done, one of my favorites, actually, that you did was the Dream Killer with Ryan Ferguson. Like that was such a unique story, and like how do you come up with ideas? Do people bring ideas to you? Do you take ideas to others, or how does that kind of work out?
I'd say I'd say like 70% are ideas or stories that I've dug up and I'm really interested in. And then maybe 30% of the time, someone will come to me with a story that I find interesting and want to pursue. So it kind of differs, but I think that I always think it's interesting to do different types of projects. I like to mix it up. I like it when people are surprised that my name is attached to something that they wouldn't have necessarily thought of going into it.
Yep.
I think that's like an interesting challenge. I do think a lot of my documentaries deal with underdogs in some capacity, whether it's an underdog in the sports world or someone like Ryan Ferguson, who was wrongfully incarcerated for a murder he didn't commit. He, in a lot of ways, was an underdog. So I like people that are a lot of times overlooked or misunderstood. That line of story, that type of character always fascinates me. So I think that's something that I happen to resonate with, and I think you see in a lot of my projects.
Do you feel like you kind of relate to it? Is that why it kind of gravitates towards something like that, or is it just something you're just literally just fascinated with?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think I relate to it in some capacity. I think, growing up, I changed schools a lot. I wasn't always like with the popular crowd. I went through puberty in like fourth grade and was this giant. I was like 6'1", 200 pounds in the fourth grade and didn't always click with students. So I think there's something about the underdog that definitely resonates on a personal level with me. And then I think they also just make for interesting stories of empathetic people that you really want to root for and see overcome. And so I think it's probably a combination of both.
When you were doing the documentary Dream Killer about Ryan Ferguson, and like I said, I kind of went all in with that by watching the film, and then obviously listen to his podcast Prison Counts, which is I find really interesting as well.
Great podcast, right? I love that podcast.
It is. It's such a cool dynamic with him and Dave. It's just hearing those stories kind of from a firsthand look, and then
you should have them on your podcast.
I sent him a note. He didn't respond to me yet, so.
Oh, I'll set that up.
All right, appreciate it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess one of the questions I had was going into that. You talked a lot about bringing a lot of light to like wrongful convictions, things like that. Was that kind of your intent going into that, or was it literally just telling a story of somebody who kind of needed some sort of vindication?
Going into Dream Killer, this story about Ryan Ferguson, who was sent to prison for a murder he did not commit. Starting it, I was just hoping to make a movie that would show he was innocent. Kind of like what The Thin Blue Line did back in the late 80s, another documentary that essentially proved someone's innocence. So I thought we would just go through we would go through the facts, highlight the key characters, go through the different narratives, and just prove that he was innocent. We started filming him maybe 7 years into him being behind bars. And then just as we were about done filming, 9.5 years into him being behind bars, he was let out. And so at that point, we changed the movie because he no longer needed us to prove his innocence. He had a great lawyer that did that. We made the movie more about his dad and Ryan's dad's 9.5 year odyssey in trying to get his son out of prison. And so the movie kind of shifted, where originally it was about proving his innocence. He didn't need us to do that. So we ended up telling another story, which was really a kind of a father-son dynamic.
Yeah, he was all in and hard pressed. Like as a parent myself, like I can understand the need or the want to kind of, or the desire to prove your child's innocence. like there's always in the back of the mind. I was like, well, maybe did it happen, but he was all in. He believed, through and through that his son was innocent. He was going to do whatever it took to kind of get him out of that situation, which is incredible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So one of the other podcasts you do, aside from What Really Happened, which I'm hoping you have another season coming up at some point, but you do Gangster Capitalism. I think one of the things I had a question about that was, do you ever face any type of backlash from any of the stuff that you put out there? I mean, obviously, you didn't paint Liberty University, or the faculty there isn't necessarily the best light with Jerry Falwell. Do you get any type of backlash from anybody from within that realm?
Not really. Not as much as you'd probably think. I think that I have my own, it's just my opinion and nothing more than that. I have a feeling that a lot of the people at Liberty know that they did do something wrong, know that they did something wrong.
Right.
And by reaching out, they're only giving us more, we can report on that. So if
right.
Joe Smith, whoever reaches out and says, this is wrong and this is why you're wrong, we'll report what they're saying, and then we'll probably go on to disprove what they're saying. The facts are on our side. And I think that's the big thing with gangster capitalism in particular, and really anything, but the facts are on our side, and we never insert our own opinions into it. We never get subjective. It's always of all of the projects I work on, I'd say that's it's more rooted in journalism than anything else I've done. And that's a credit to the team that really works on that show. And so, no, not a lot of, I've gotten backlash on some projects, but no, not really as much as one would think.
Does that ever creep into the back of your mind as you're producing something like that? Like, what are the people that this is about going to be, how are they going to take it, or what kind of things they might say out in public, or try to, basically discredit you at all?
No, I don't. I'm curious. Don't get me wrong. I'm curious. I'm always curious. I'm I wonder what this person is going to think when they're sitting in their living room listening to this or watching this. I think it'd be weird to not be curious. You spend months, if not longer, capturing this person's essence or whatever it may be. And I think that it crosses your mind, but no, you're not. At least I'm never sort of adjusting things or changing things because I think someone, I'm very upfront and fair and open when I approach someone about doing a project, and I don't say one thing and then do another. So there shouldn't be any surprises if someone doesn't look great or they're not pleased. I know deep down that I'd never mischaracterize something.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those, being able to live with yourself because you're telling the truth, kind of sort of thing. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, that's a much more succinct way to put it. Yeah.
I remember talking about this with you before, but I want to circle back a little bit to your other podcast, What Really Happened. How did you square up with The Rock? That's a kind of an interesting story and an interesting pairing, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm repped by an agency called WME. They help sometimes find different gigs for me. And I was talking to them, and one of my agents said you would get along really well with The Rock and his right-hand guy, this guy named Brian Gewirtz. And you guys might just have projects that, you would both be interested in pursuing together. So I was talking to them about this interesting story I had followed about Muhammad Ali, and this time that he may or may not have talked a guy out of committing suicide. And I told the story to Brian, and he said, it's funny, Dwayne is a huge Ali fan.
Yep.
And so we talked more about it, and I thought that maybe it could be a documentary. And in discussing it, we thought maybe it would be a good idea for an episode of a podcast. And the podcast itself, every episode would be a different kind of what really happened episode.
Yep.
So that's how it all started, was really an agent sort of seeing that we had similar interests. You know, Dwayne is really into documentaries. He's a big fan of docs. So there was just some synergy there that made sense, and got that going. And it's been a great relationship.
Yeah, as a huge wrestling fan, I think Brian Gorse, right? He was Rock's writer, I think, when he was with WWE, right?
He was, and then I think he was like the head writer of
Yep.
WWE for a while as well. He's like a big. I didn't really know this at first, but excuse me. I didn't really know this at first, but he's like a mini celebrity in the wrestling world.
Yes, he is. I can attest to that. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So he has a book coming out, which I should
Does he?
plug. People should
Yeah.
check that out. Yeah, it's coming out soon. I think you can already pre-order it on Amazon. Brian Gewirtz.
Yep. He's yeah, I'm definitely gonna read that because I'm fascinated a lot by that was the kind of the heyday of my fandom, back in the Attitude Era when it was kind of a lot of mainstream and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
do you still stay in touch with him and his team, and are you still planning on doing things in the future with them?
I love what they kind of stand for, and their ethos and their brand and who they are as people. So a lot of projects I have, I'll run it by them. Would you guys be interested in this? They're kind of one of the first people that I go to if I think that the material aligns with the stuff that they tend to produce. So yes, is the answer. Absolutely.
Awesome. One of the things that again fascinated me about you was, you speak very openly and candidly about, your journey with chronic depression and mental health. Being in the entertainment industry, do you find that adversely affects your creative process at all, or is it kind of a catalyst for the creative process?
Well, that's a good question. Listen, I think dealing with chronic depression can slow you down in a lot of ways, especially when you're really feeling particularly down. I would hesitate to say there's like a lot of upside, but that said, I think there is some nuance to it. And I do think that my work has always been the greatest distraction from feeling that way. And I think that's why I've done, a bunch of seasons of television, 3 or 4 seasons of television, 5 or 6 seasons of podcasts, almost 10 movies now. Like I do a lot of work because it's kind of the best therapy for me. So there's sort of 2 sides to it. I think if I didn't have depression, I probably wouldn't work as hard or as much as I do.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't wish depression upon anyone. So there's it's not a simple answer, but that's kind of how I've always looked at it.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring it up too is for somebody who also suffers from mental health. I have, some anxiety and some, mild depression. So I don't want to obviously compare to what you go through, but I find for me it creates. I feel like I'm more passionate one way or another because of it. I experience a little bit more of the, when you're, like you said, when you're down, man, it's hard. It's a bad place to be.
Yeah.
But I also feel like on the flip side of that too, like you said, it kind of makes you work a little bit harder. So it's something that you kind of notice, and that's something that drives me every day to, work harder at being better. But also that kind of translates in the work that I do too. So that was one of the reasons that I kind of brought that up, was I relate to it in a certain degree. And I find that there are certainly times where it's a hindrance to what I do for a living. But at the same time, I also feel like it's also a driving force to succeed and be better at what I'm doing. So that was kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I think a lot of times we live in a world where it's like black or white. It's either good or bad. You like the picture or you don't like. I think there's a lot of nuance to this type of thing. So it's not necessarily like one way or the other, but yeah, chronic depression is certainly no joke.
I know every once in a while you'll put something out on your social media and you say you get a lot of responses from that, a lot of people kind of reaching out to you, and you try to, obviously weed out the people that are sincere in it and try to help them as much as you can too. With social media kind of being such a toxic place, like how do you decide who you want to reach out to and be genuine, or know that they're genuine, trying to, ask for your help or at least, something to that degree?
I never really question, not that you're saying this, but I never really question people's sincerity when I write something on Instagram or what have you about my own experience, and people seemingly out of the woodwork respond with their own stories. I even if it's a few hundred responses or more, it may take me a little while, but I try and respond to everyone. I obviously can't be there in the way that some people maybe are asking, but I always try and be there to just show support. You're not alone. I think that goes a long way. It's not nearly as much as, I would like to do, but I think that's a big thing, is like, it's not, some people reach out and maybe they're not having a good day. And that's not to take away or any less than the person who's maybe like me and dealing with it for years on end. Like, you're having a bad day, that we're not going to judge that, whether it's better or worse than my experience. Everyone has their own stories and ups and downs that need to be respected. And so I appreciate the energy that they put into reaching out to me. And I think it's kind of important for me to respond in some capacity.
Yeah, I think having it out there in a more public fashion too, and for some reason, even in 2022 here, mental health sometimes has quite the negative stigma, despite the fact that it affects probably, I would say, more people than not. And the fact that you're willing to put yourself out there is kind of admirable, to be honest with you. And that's, again, another reason why I wanted to talk to you, because it's relatable, and to see somebody that's in more of a public forum, such as you, be open and honest about it and willing to kind of, be vulnerable in that situation was, like I said, it was admirable. So.
No, I really appreciate that. And you've motivated me to maybe post something next week about it. I haven't posted about depression in a few months. So I appreciate it. It means a lot hearing that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to ask people when they're coming on this podcast is, about your career and success and things like that. Like, what does success look like to you, and have you reached it, or is it something that you're always going to be kind of working towards?
Damn, that's a good question.
Sorry, it was a loaded one.
No, better. Why not? Might as well be loaded. I don't know. It's a good. I really like to make projects that are entertaining, substantive, and reach a lot of people. And I think sometimes I have to be okay with that not necessarily being the case. Like, I think it's important to find value in all of my projects and not diminish one versus another because maybe not as many people saw it or watched it. I think for me, it's just like really trying to tell a good story and letting the rest fall into place. As it may, you can't really determine. It's kind of out of my hands how many people will see something. So I think for me, it's like, all right, did I work really hard on this? Is it something that I really put a lot of care into? And it sounds cheesy, but did I do my best or not? And if I did, then I feel good about my career, and I feel like I've done everything that I can. Are there days when I get, pissy because it only went so far, or I didn't edit it the way that I wanted to? Yes, of course. But I try and take the long view and just remember that I am very fortunate where I am. I have access to people like The Rock or The Rock's team, and I have access to pitching my projects to people that I'd want. So, you always think of ways in which things could be better, but it's important to remember, what you do have going. And I've definitely come a long way since I was a 10-year-old with a VHS camera.
Is there anything you haven't done yet that you want to do? Like, is there like a dream project that, it's just always in the back of your head? Like, I'd love to do this before this is all said and done.
I really I had an MTV show for 2 years. where I explored different subcultures, different worlds, if you will. I lived with a young woman who was homeless, a young man with autism, a poker player, all sorts of different individuals. I think it'd be cool to do something like that, but where I explore mental health around the world, kind of like Anthony Bourdain meets mental health.
Okay.
And so
it's an interesting pairing to speak of.
Yeah. And I think just like exploring going to different countries, exploring different cultures, and seeing what mental health means to them and how they define happiness and how they deal with things like depression or people with mood disorders. And so I think that would be kind of top of mind. I think my second answer would be something maybe in the scripted realm. I've only done documentaries, which is kind of how I like it, but I wouldn't be opposed to trying something on the scripted front either.
Okay. Yeah, I think the idea is fascinating. Like, I hope you get that done. The whole going around the world, because like you said, happiness is different to everybody, and different cultures have different versions of that, or different statuses within that. So I think that'd be really really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go on a little bit later on in the last couple of questions here, but tell me about your new movie, $1 Billion Babies. That's an interesting topic to cover.
Yeah. So the $1 Billion Babies, the true story of the Cabbage Patch Kids. When does this come out, this interview?
That's a great question. I'm still working on the order, but I may actually put this one out first. So it could be out as early as this Friday.
Okay. So $1 Billion Babies, the true story of the Cabbage Patch Kids. Depending on when someone will listen to this interview, it is available on the Tribeca Festival website. If not, it'll be out on hopefully a larger platform in the coming months. But $1 Billion Babies is about the Cabbage Patch Kids. And the Cabbage Patch Kids came out in 1983. And it was almost like the first example of Black Friday, where people just went nuts, fighting in stores, near riots. I mean, you name it. And there's great archival video footage of all of this. And so the movie looks at two things. It looks at one, why were people reacting this way? What was it about society and culture? What was it about these dolls? That's what Cabbage Patch Kids are. They're these dolls. And then the other part of the movie looks at the origin story and who really invented the Cabbage Patch Kids, because there's some disagreement in terms of who really came up with the concept of these dolls. And so there's a little bit of scandal, if you will. And we really explore that and highlight the different artists the doll makers that were involved. And it takes on a kind of a more serious tone than probably one would expect going into the movie.
Did you come up with this idea, or was this something that was brought to you?
This is a good example of something that was brought to me.
Okay.
I knew nothing. I knew of the Cabbage Patch Kids, but that was about it. And someone brought this idea to me. They had sold the idea. They had gotten financing for the idea from NBC Universal Syndication Studios. And between them and this company, Believe Entertainment Group, they really had a lot of belief and support for the film. And so it was an easy one for me to sign up to direct.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see it. I haven't had a chance to kind of check that on the website, but I'll probably do that over the weekend here. So where can people find you online? And is there anything you want to kind of throw out there and promote before we get wrapped up?
Yeah, you can follow me. I'm most active on Instagram at Andrew Jenks. I'm on Twitter and Facebook also at Andrew Jenks. But yeah, for any projects, I tend to update Instagram the most with what's going on and where you can see things and the latest and greatest.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I didn't want to keep it too long, but I appreciate you taking some time on this Saturday to do this. It's really an honor and a privilege to speak to you, not only once, but now twice in a little bit different format at this point. But again, thank you so much for being open, honest, doing the show. And I love speaking to you, and I look forward to hopefully doing it again in the future.
Yeah, man. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
guest this week, Andrew Jenks, for joining me. Man, what an amazing interview. Super, super interesting guy. Amazing career so far and so much more to do. Again, I can't thank Andrew enough for coming on. Like he said, you can check him out at Andrew Jenks on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I think he does a lot on Instagram. I really can't appreciate his openness any more than I do. For him to be as open and honest about, some of the mental health aspects and, a lot of the stuff that he's done and really how that, affects what he does. And, again, this is the second time I've had a chance to interview him. I interviewed him on my old podcast, and, really this time I wanted to make it a little bit different. And, man, I'm not disappointed at all, man. This was a great interview with amazing content. I cannot thank him enough for coming on. Again, check out his film on the Tribeca website right now, and probably, if you're not listening to this as soon as this comes out, it'll be on some major platform soon. $1 Billion Babies, the story of the Cabbage Patch Dolls. And, man, I was on such an adrenaline high after doing this interview because, I was really excited for the interview. Andrew is an awesome, awesome guy. I can't believe he took the time to do this on a Saturday for me. And, again, can't thank him enough. Please check out his stuff. Support everything that he does. I appreciate everybody listening. If you like this podcast, you like this interview, give us a 5-star review anywhere you can. Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, all that. But stay tuned next week. Next week we continue on a little bit with mental health. I'm going to interview Jake Wright, who suffers with bipolar disorder, and we talk a lot about how that affects him in mental health. And I can't wait to share that interview with you as well. Again, thanks for tuning in for the first episode of Season 1, Andrew Jenks interview. Again, you can find me at You Fascinate Me Pod on Instagram, and you can do You Fascinate Me with Jamie Engle on Facebook. Again, thank you for your support. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, download each and every episode, and leave us a great review. And I thank you and can't wait to see you next week.